I started in 1977. I was 20 years old, but I always wanted to work at a zoo from the time I was 3. So I finally got old enough to where I had a shot. I wanted to work in the reptile house, what I was qualified to do, but there wasn't an opening in the reptile house. So they put me where there was an opening, which was elephants, which was a very strange, well, not so much then, but seems like a very strange and unwise thing to do now. It wouldn't be done now. I'd been to the circus, so I had some experience with elephants, watching them do circus tricks. And that was pretty much the end of my elephant experience. But I have to say, that was not something that I planned, but it was some of my best memories, and I feel really fortunate that I got a chance to work with elephants. It was not something I was going to choose to do. Yeah, working with the elephants for a year and a half, which is as long as I stayed, was pretty darn remarkably great memories. Yeah, I have some pictures of me with Ty leading her around, and as I recall, my head was about even with her shoulders. She was, well, maybe not that much, but she has grown significantly. She was a young female back then. That was almost 50 years ago. So yeah, she was young. I really liked Ty, and I do believe that elephants never forget. They're unbelievably intelligent, unbelievably intelligent. They have a soul, they really do. And so I always believe that even when I walk past that lot 45 years later, that she knew me like anybody. Any human would not forget me after 45 years. Yeah, they're really cool animals. I always feel like I've been really blessed in 3 ways. One is I knew what I wanted to do from the beginning, and I know so many people that that's quite a journey and a struggle to figure out where they fit in and what they're going to be good at. But I knew instantly; it was just given to me. I was with snakes when I was 5. I loved them from the minute I was conscious of the world around me. I just was born with it. Secondly, I got to do it. How many people want to be an astronaut or a major league player or a rock star? They know what they want to do, but are you going to get the chance to do it? Many people don't. I got the chance. And then the third one is that people don't think about is sometimes you get what you want and it's not what you thought it was going to be. And it's not so fun to be a celebrity or something like that because you didn't know that all. But for my case, it was better than I thought it'd be. I've always been a researcher in spirit anyway. I remember when I was a little boy, I found these notes. My mom gave me these notes and pictures that I'd drawn when I was a little boy. And I'd forgotten about this, but I had a garter snake. Well, I had a series of garter snakes. They were all named Fred. Fred the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I burned through the Freds because I wanted them, but I didn't really know how to take care of them. So these Freds didn't tend to live very long. But I was undeterred. So I think Fred the 3rd or 4th, I found my little scientific journal in my little crayon scroll, and it's something to the effect that, Fred is not eating. Tomorrow I will try assisted feeding followed by a force feeding. This is all noted down with dates and all that. I will observe his response, and then like a couple days later, there was another notation that indicated that Fred had died. But I always had that in me. When I came on to this zoo, and this was just like most zoos, there was no conservation efforts other than the idea of the zoos being an ark. And it has legitimacy. We have pairs of animals, we're breeding them, therefore we're conserving them. And the limitations of that are now very clear. And I think the first real research efforts that I would call conservation research were done by our former director at the time, the curator of mammals, Chuck Brady. He came from an academic background, and so he started some work in the Pantanal region of Brazil, working with other agencies on studying jaguars in the wild and also the general fauna of the Pantanal and Cape hunting dogs as well. That was kind of a precursor to what we do a lot of now. And then I was doing work that I was publishing and all that. I would call it conservation research. And that was really it for a while. So that's kind of how I sort of began to become more and more of my daily thought process at work. I started going to Louisiana, visiting the old historical sites. The snake hadn't been seen in the wild for quite a long time, and so I went through the literature, found some old sites, Yellow Pine and Glenmora and Longleaf and all these little towns, and I went to see kind of what the status was now of those lands, which was mostly were cow pastures. And then I thought, well, I'll span the area and hunt the area and try to ground up a few snakes and start a breeding program. That's what I wanted to do right from the get-go. And I was doing that in 1984, 1985, and starting to bring in snakes around the mid-'80s that are the founders, really, many of the founders for the breeding program today. Everybody's got a Rhode Island rattlesnakes, Louisiana pine snakes, reticulated pythons, blood pythons, green tree pythons, all the species that are managed and are prioritized. That's been a big change too. And the last thing I'll say about that is I guess it was an awful lot of fun back in the old days to go through these lists pre-internet. You just get a paper list in the mail and they put them out every month, and dozens of dealers specialize in mammals, birds, reptiles. The reptiles were the ones I most looked at. And every month you'd get this thing and you'd flip through it, and it was basically almost a complete list of the reptiles and amphibians of the world. At least if you waited 6 months, everything was going to pop up at least once. And you just go through them and go, Ceylon pink-headed pythons. Oh, Azemiops pit viper, let's get 2 of those. Sri Lankan hump-nosed vipers. I've always wanted to see one of those. Let's get a male and 2 females. And you'd get them a week later, and it was so much fun to get these species in, and not just to get them in, but to bring it in. See, we thought we were scientists back then. We could bring it in. They'd never been kept in captivity before. Nobody was even really sure what they ate, how they bred. Were they egg layers, live bears? Nobody knew. And so we bring these in, and that was a big part of our focus and our mind, our brain space usage, was to bring these things in, and the challenge was to figure out how to keep them healthy, how to get them to reproduce, and then also, if you could get them to reproduce, voila, another species saved. And we were conservationists. Yeah. I was a zookeeper, and then I was assistant curator of reptiles and aquarium, and then I became curator of the reptiles and aquarium. Then added on to that was the Komodo exhibit, and then added on to that, there's been 3 iterations of the butterfly exhibit, but the first 2 were just strictly in my department. Added on to that was maybe the exhibit that I won't say most proud of, but I thought it was maybe the coolest exhibit that I've ever been involved with. That was the spider exhibit, the now forgotten spider exhibit. This is not about me, but we had the first, and to this date, no one's ever tried to repeat it, the only standalone exhibit dedicated to spiders of the world was at the Memphis Zoo. No European zoo has ever tried to do this. It was pretty darn cool. We had spiders from all over the world. We had the only Sydney funnel web spiders, which are the most toxic spider in the world. They're incredibly difficult to get out of Australia, but managed to do it. We had the only giant New Zealand huntsman spiders. There were none in captivity, and I managed to get those out of New Zealand. On and on and on. We had so many cool things in that building. A zookeeper, assistant curator, got different things added onto it. One of the best things that ever happened to me, it was close to maybe the best job I ever had, but only was number 2, and that was when the nocturnal building was added to my department. And I thought it would be great because little mammals, I mean, basically it's like keeping reptiles. They're in little containers. They're almost like terrarium creatures. Great diversity in the building instead of the elephant building where there's like 1 species, 2 species. This was like 30, 40 species. So I could really relate reptile house management experience to a small mammal collection. And it was just so much fun. It was like working with elephants. I never would have ever expected to be managing a collection of small mammals. And then from that position, I took the research position, which is the most enjoyable job I've ever had by no comparison. Yeah. Animal welfare is what's changed. That word was never hardly uttered, I don't think. Enrichment was never uttered. There was some things that we could see now that people were enriching their animals, but that's changed, and it's now gotten into reptiles, which is a little more difficult. How do you enrich an animal that you can't quite get behind their eyes and figure out what's going on in there like you can with mammals? But I do believe, and I'm believing it more and more every day, that reptiles are also sentient beings, probably a lot more intelligent and aware of themselves and things than I ever thought. It's been a big change in my mind and probably a lot of people's minds. So I see that in the reptile house, and it's quite surprising, and it's quite heartwarming to see keepers now worried about whether their snakes are bored, because they probably are. And who would have ever thought such a crazy thing 20, 30, 40 years ago? So they're very much concerned with that, and almost everything that reptile keepers do, and I've got basically reptile keepers in the research department too. They're always thinking about the animals' inner welfare, their happiness. We do a lot of that too. When now we have an animal welfare team under research. It's the perfect place for it. That's something that is very exciting to me to at this stage to suddenly be looking at these animals that I've known all my life and thought I knew extremely well. And it's like maybe there's a big part of those animals that I have no clue about. And now we're just starting to poke around in that area.